much. Well, my name is Jose Julio Ortega. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the keynote speaker of today, Dr. Bernhard, Executive Director of the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA. We have, with his keynote, an extremely good opportunity to see directly how SETAC science can impact our society today. As a member of the EFSA Stakeholder Bureau, appointed by SETAC Europe, I have been a direct witness of EFSA's efforts for building and maintaining confidence with scientific stakeholders. But you will see this right now with Dr. Ull's keynote. Before he starts, I would like to briefly introduce you Dr. Ull. He graduated from the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna in 1987 and became a doctor of veterinary medicine in 1990. He has published in the field of veterinary medicine with a particular focus on listeria and milk hygiene. A qualified veterinarian by training, he brings high-level management experience from food safety organization to his role in EFSA. Dr. Ull was managing director of the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety, which represents Austria on EFSA's advisory forum. During his 10 years at that agency, he was in charge of technical and scientific affairs with a remit that included the timely delivery of risk assessment and risk management services across a wide range of areas. This included ensuring effective risk communications during urgent food safety-related events. From 2008 to March 2012, he also served as a member of EFSA Management Board. Dr. Ull joins EFSA in June 2012. He was appointed Executive Director of EFSA in June 2014. So, welcome, Bernhard.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you at SETAC. We will see then afterwards whether with risk communication this was a good experience I have gained or not. You will tell me maybe in the feedback afterwards what we can achieve here. I'm really happy to be here at your 28th meeting in Rome, and I think today is a good day to also think of an Israeli historian, Yuval Noah Harari, who said, "The human mankind has gained control over old enemies, famine, plague, and war." So basically, we have transformed them. Well, of course, we could say, now, is this really true for all of the world? But if you look into the history of famine, plague, and war, what we have now is a big, big progress compared to what we had, let's say, 300 years ago. So basically, we have transformed them from incomprehensible and uncontrollable forces of nature into manageable challenges. And Yuval Harari, in his book Homo Deus, is now developing the thought that human mankind is now striving for happiness, immortality, and God-like forces. But on the way to this happiness, immortality, God-like forces, we face an unprecedented, abrupt changes in our society, in environment, in technology, in the social cohesion of the society, in economics, in politics. And these changes are accelerating, so it's nothing that is stable. It seems to be as if we were on an exponential growth of change. And we all know the predictions about the growth of the world population, 9–10 billion in 2050. We know that the world exports of agricultural products have increased by 70% in the last 10 years. And we will face a huge challenge in the urbanization of the globe. We had, in 1950, only about 30% of the world population living in urban environments, And the estimation is that in 2050 it will be 2/3 of the world population living in urban environments. We also have a sharp increase in tourism, in arrivals and departures of people across the world. And we also see an increase in alien species recordings, alien species that have been introduced over the last 200 years. And there are figures indicating that in the last 40 years, 37% of all first recordings of introduced alien species have been recorded. Of course, this is also linked to the global trade and the global movement of goods, of animals, of commodities, and with them we trade alien species, we trade hazards, we trade risks. I just want to remember here in Italy the introduction of Xylella fastidiosa to the Italian olive tree production 5-6 years ago, most likely via a coffee plant from the Mid-Americas, and now we have a huge threat for the whole European olive tree production, now mainly focused in Puglia, but not only, also in other countries. We have, in the meantime, positive results on Xylella fastidiosa. And we have a shrinking ice cover. The Arctic Sea ice maximum is at the second lowest in the last 40 years. So things are changing, and in addition, what we see is a confluence of new technologies. It's not only individual technologies that are developing, it's also a confluence of technologies. And for example, in terms of precision farming, the European Commission has made clear that precision farming with the use of digital technologies for monitoring and optimizing agricultural production will play a key role in addressing climate change and the nurturing of 10 billion people. And also what we see in data production, there's a study by IBM that says 90% of the data that we find now in the internet has been generated since 2016. So obviously there's also an exponential growth of data that is available. And we have information stemming from new technologies. You all are aware of that also in the food safety field we have now new forms of evidence and information emerging from new methods that enrich the available data sets in terms of in vitro systems, physiology-based models, in silico tools, omics technologies that give us also a vast amount of data that we will have to integrate into our risk assessment process. And I would like to come back to the confluence of technologies and give one example about the confluence of the data sciences and biology. Today it's easily possible to sequence a human genome completely, to upload the data into the cloud, and then have artificial intelligence algorithms plow through the data and look for sequences that predict possible diseases in the next generation. And then we can give the genome back to biology, to CRISPR-Cas, gene editing, and we can basically edit and alter gene sequences to prevent the expression of diseases. And there is a race going on between the United States and China about leadership in these technologies, the confluence between biology sciences and data sciences. And if you think of the possible applications, they are both fascinating and frightening. So what we see is also an increase in complexity. The system constituted by this triangle environment, technology, food safety, is complex in itself because of its global, interconnected and multi-layered nature. It becomes even more complex if we think about the observed global changes and their interactions. We have environmental trends like climate change, habitat change, land use change, technological revolutions. We have societal change like human migration, global human travels, changing societal interests, perceptions, attitudes, values, emergence of new sensitivity toward agroecological approaches, demands to reduce animal testing, urbanization. And altogether, they expose new patterns and drive new patterns of exposure, and they drive new or re-emerging hazards. And not enough with that. We also see a decrease in trust. In this content of complex and rapid changes, we, people, feel threatened, at least many of us. We lose points of reference. The traditional political, social, religious beliefs are swaying. There's a very interesting survey, it's called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And Edelman Trust Barometer is monitoring the trust of the public in authorities, business, media, and NGOs in 28 countries for now 17 years. It's publicly available. 2017, they headlined their report, Trust in Crisis. In 20 out of 28 countries, the majority of the population has no trust in their institutions. For trust in media, the figures are even worse. But also for experts, the Edelman study doesn't convey good news. With 60% agreement, people give the most trust to their peers, a person like I am myself. 60%, a person like I am myself. Whereas public servants and regulators achieve 29% of trust. Tendency is decreasing. And what is specifically concerning in this context, from my point of view, is the concurrence of two phenomena. One is that people express fear of corruption, globalization, immigration, eroding social values, pace of innovation. And at the same time, people lose the faith in the societal cohesion. In 1 out of 2 countries, the majority of the people say the system is failing. The majority of the people say the system is failing. And now the coincidence of fear on the one side and the conviction of living in a failing system really gives a fertile ground for populistic actions. And that's what we see not only in Europe. So something happens in the society. So all this together poses challenges, obviously, but also opportunities for us in the scientific field, in the risk assessment profession. It's not only related to food safety, it's the whole scientific community involved with environmental quality and health protection and with advising politicians. The SETAC context, from my point of view, is in the center, fits into the center of these challenges and opportunities. SETAC is engaged in the study, analysis, and solution of environmental problems. In this context, research and technological development play a fundamental role. Research aiming at fostering environmental quality needs to be responsible and innovative, and this is exactly the focus of your meeting here in Rome. Obviously, environmental quality and technological development are strongly linked with food safety. Adverse effects on the environment may pose an indirect risk to food and feed safety. Likewise, the food system may have adverse effects on the environment. Therefore, environment and food safety should be considered together when designing effective protection policies, aiming at the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Consistent approaches for scientific assessment and data management need to be developed for environment and food safety. integrating also, and I will come back to that, societal, technological and economic drivers in order to effectively cope with the changes and also the data revolution that we are observing. Examples of these interlinkages between environment and food safety are obvious. Some solutions that are considered as environmental sustainable, such as circular economy and urban farming, may drive emerging risks for food safety. Circular economy promotes closed loops, including reusage of sewage sludge from wastewater treatment plants. Indeed, this has a great fertilizer potential, and its usage for agricultural purposes seems to be the best sustainable option for its disposal. However, this practice may have relevant food safety implications, as we all know. And the same is true for urban agriculture. It's increasingly popular, however, the characterization of the urban setting, like the significant concentration of lead and other heavy metals in soil, may also pose additional risks to food safety. Microplastics have been considered as an environmental concern for a long time. The impact on marine mammals and ecosystems in general has been extensively studied. Now we are realizing that it may also constitute an emerging risk for food safety. Microplastics can and they are transferred along the food chain up to humans. A few words about the role of EFSA. EFSA plays a role in this complex environment, technology, food safety triangle. What we are made for as EFSA is to provide independent scientific advice on all matters related with food and feed, with a direct or indirect impact on human health, plant health and animal health. What we do, we carry out risk assessments on a wide range of chemical and biological agents that they might be present in the environment naturally or as a result of man-made activity. What we do not do is risk management. This was one of the learnings of the BSE crisis in Europe, that risk assessment and risk management should be separated. And Europe has gone very far in this respect, much further than the United States. Europe really has strictly separated the scientific process of risk assessment, even geographically, because we are located in Parma in Italy and not in Brussels, from the risk management, from the political process. And this separation, from my point of view, has brought many, many advantages for Europe, but it's also a difficult interface to be managed between risk managers and risk assessors, also having in mind the common task of risk communication, which is a shared task between risk assessors and risk managers. Scientific advice from EFSA also covers the risks posed by pests and weeds to plant health and all aspects of animal health and welfare of food-producing animals. Obviously, the environment can also be a vehicle for antimicrobial resistance to food and animals, and EFSA is examining the factors which may lead to the presence of antimicrobial resistance bacteria, including the spread through the environment, through air, soil, and water. However, it may be less known that EFSA also takes into account the risks to the environment in its assessments of, for example, plant protection products, the deliberate release into the environment of GMOs, and the use of certain substances in food and feed, for example, feed additives. There EFSA does, by definition, also environmental risk assessment. Also, EFSA assesses the environmental risks related to the entry and spread of invasive alien species harmful for plant health. A changing environment and new technologies can also drive emerging risks for food safety. And here we have a legal task as EFSA. We have the legal obligation to establish monitoring procedures for systematically searching for, collecting, collating and analyzing information and data with a view of identification of emerging risks in our whole mission field. Now, when we look at this global environment and the challenges that we face, the public, but also scientists, are asking some quite far-reaching questions on how we can make our system resilient to these changes. And some questions that we face are, is the regulatory framework with all its fragmentation and sectoriality fit for purpose? Is it smart that we regulate biocides, pesticides, chemicals, veterinary medicines differently, although they can be the same chemical substance? Like we had a little issue last year with fipronil. Some of you may have heard about that last summer, because it's a biocide, it's a pesticide, and it's also a veterinary drug. And because of a misuse, we had residues in food, and then we also had to think who set which ADI level and which was the most critical endpoint, and what did the biocide people say, and the pesticide people, and the veterinary medicines people. So the regulatory framework could also be improved. Another question is, are the risk assessment methodologies still adequate? Does our animal model that we use for setting health-based guidance value address questions like autism or Parkinson's disease or childhood leukemia? So also here in the methodology development, we have homework to do. And what I see here is a kind of a bizarre phenomenon, because obviously industry is innovating relentlessly because of competition, and the risk assessment sciences are much slower in innovation, also because we have to ask how research money is directed, for example, in Europe. So the gap between innovation in industry and our risk assessment capabilities is increasing, which means what can we do if we lack data? If we don't have the right methodologies, we increase uncertainty factors. So basically you could even say, do our risk assessments become over-conservative because we miss information that we should have about new processes, new products that are used, but we are not yet ready to assess them properly. We could also ask the question whether the scientific bias towards the deep knowledge of the usual suspects, the known risks, I would call it what we produce in science are small bricks. And as science is so competitive, and we all have to follow the motto publish or perish, the area we cover is getting smaller and smaller. We are digging deeper and deeper, so the bricks are getting micro bricks, nano bricks. They are getting smaller and smaller, the bricks that we mine like in Bitcoin production. But is this, looking at the bricks, giving us the answer about the resilience of the house? And the answer is obviously no. So also here for EFSA, it's an important question. Are we looking at the right thing when we assess the risk of migration of substances from food contact materials into food? Yes, we do that, and I think we do it well. But then this food contact material ends up in the environment and enters into the food chain. But we look only at migration and human health. So the question is, do we have enough holistic approaches to risks? And then the question could be asked, which weight do we give to the now new, largely available evidence? What about this post-truth thing? And is an evidence-based approach always fit for purpose? We have had quite a discussion in Europe over the last 2 years about a plant protection product, a herbicide. And EFSA had a role also in the assessment of this herbicide. And after 2 years, it really reminded me of Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize laureate of economics, who said basically, at the end, evidence does not count. So we could have had another 100 mammalian toxicology studies of this herbicide. It wouldn't have changed anything in the public discussion, because evidence didn't count anymore. We were on a different level of discussion, a kind of a proxy discussion about what kind of food production do we want to have in Europe? What kind of agro-food system do we want to promote in Europe? Do we want to use agrochemicals, yes or no? And if no, what are the consequences on biodiversity, on prices, on risks? Who has the risks and who has the benefits? if we would not use glyphosate, for example. But this was never discussed. It focused on a safety discussion, whether a dose of 4,000 milligrams per kilogram for a rat still can give useful information when you look at cancer endpoints. Yes or no? That was basically a big question between regulatory agencies in Europe and a WHO organization. So I ask myself, when we then also talk about risk communication, is this evidence approach that we say, we scientists, we know it? At least we have an approximation to the truth. And we improve this approximation to the phenomena of nature and society more and more. But is this enough, this approach of saying, we know and we will tell you? I have my doubts. And if you follow discussion on vaccination in Europe, but not only in Europe, also in the United States, you could see that science is just one more opinion. Basically, science has the same weight as the opinion of my Aunt Mary, more or less. Yes, of course, we are laughing about that, but if a famous Hollywood actor says that vaccination leads to autism, this has the same, maybe more weight than the American Academy of Science opinion. So also here we come back to this very delicate currency of trust. And I think science is not in a good position here. But if we cannot convince people with our evidence, because this evidence is cold and careless, it's just facts. It's nothing more. It's not giving the feeling that we care for the society. I try to be a bit provocative now. If this is the case, maybe we have to think whether we can influence the value building of the society. How are these values built? Because when we come with our facts, nothing changes. It's too late. So can we be part of the value building? Or differently, can we bring the society into the scientific endeavor? And then people say, but are you stupid or what? We are the scientists. You cannot ask these people out there to do science because you have to be a SETAC certified environmental toxicologist to do science or something similar, not only. But the question is really, can we bring the society closer to the scientific endeavor? So what can we do to rebuild trust? Communication is a necessity, but it's not enough. The old paradigm of communication, from my point of view, and not only mine, that if we could only give enough information to them, then they would have to believe us, has proven to be wrong, wrong, wrong. It's not about information. It's a necessity, but it's not enough. So maybe we can, and we have to, and as EFSA we do that, we have to go a step further beyond communication, and the next step would be participation. How can we make society participate in a way, in a useful way, into our scientific enterprise? And of course, you know all the initiatives of citizen scientists, of crowdsourcing, and there are wonderful examples how strong this can be. And what we learn is that when people are directly involved, they can agree on things that they would not agree if they are dictated, imposed of them. And Marvin Mainsport, a co-director of a non-profit organization called Future Search Network, says, people support what they help to create. I think that's very smart. People support what they help to create. So maybe also in science, we need more a co-creation approach. For EFSA, in this changing world, this has big impacts on us in terms of emerging risks for food safety, in human, plant, animal health and environmental risk assessments, in data availability. What we try to do to cope with these challenges and how we can seize these opportunities is we run emerging risk processes in using drivers for long-term anticipation, having a food systems approach, and try to do predictive modeling to see how the system will react for possible emerging risks. And we try to update our risk assessment methodologies and proposing new ones. I would like to mention here the combined exposure to cumulative, or let's say the cumulative exposure to pesticides, which is a huge issue, as you all know. EFSA is working on that for many years with many European partners, but one of our main partners is the RIVM in the Netherlands. And at the end of this year, we will publish the first 2 reports on the cumulative effects of pesticides on the thyroid gland and on the nervous system. So I think also here we try to be innovative, but you may also be aware or not that we are producing guidance documents on biological relevance, on the weight of evidence approach, and a huge work on uncertainty in risk assessment. How to calculate, how to express, and how to report, and how to communicate uncertainty in risk assessment. We all know that risk assessment has uncertainties. How can it not have uncertainties? But for the risk managers, this is a difficult fact to accept. Because what they expect from science is certainty, not uncertainty. And if we now expose them to uncertainty factors, it's very difficult for risk managers to enter into this new paradigm of uncertainty. So what we do is we develop predictive models and holistic approaches for environmental risk assessment in realistic landscapes and under different scenarios of multiple stressors and factors. One example is our work on bee health. We're developing a mechanistic model, we call it APIS, REM, to assess the risks to honeybee colonies from exposure to pesticides under different scenarios of combined stressors and factors, which means beekeeping practices, biological agents, chemical agents, environmental conditions, changing in space and time. It is an individual-based model and considers different landscapes and GIS data. We also run a project which we call the Climate Change and Emerging Risks for Food Safety project. There we are testing the possibility of using drivers in the emerging risks identification process. It focuses on climate change and its potential effect on food safety, plant and animal health. It also tries to increase our horizon scanning capability with crowdsourcing and the collection of a wide range of signals. And we are testing a prioritization methodology with a discussion group composed of experts from major EU and United Nations institutions in a kind of a multi-criteria decision award tool and analysis tool. Also, EFSA has developed opinions on the extent of coverage of endangered species in current environmental risk assessment schemes that fall under our remit and the potential of the recovery of non-target organisms. Now, what can we do? What is needed is a holistic approach. In this stormy sea, splendid isolation means death. The single discipline is not able to make sense of this large amount of data and to offer effective solutions to complexity and change. People and ecosystems, as we said, are exposed to mixtures of chemicals, consumer products, medicinal products, cosmetics, contaminated water, air, soil, and also food. Acute effects are often known and managed. On the contrary, chronic, long-term effects are largely unknown, and this concept of the human exposome is gaining more and more relevance. So environment and food safety should be considered together when designing effective protection policies, again aiming towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Systemic approaches, considering the complex interactions and dynamics between the different food system actors, their behavior, external drivers, can provide tools to navigate through this stormy sea. And there we come to resilience building. In order to deal with these changes, we need to build resilience. And I mean this personally for people, but obviously also systemic. for systems. There are principles for building resilience in ecological and social systems. It's about maintaining diversity, managing interconnectivity, fostering adaptive systems thinking, broadening participation rather than centralization. And these principles build a resilient system that does not collapse if anything happens to one component. As a consequence of the need to broaden the vision and to adopt holistic approaches for ensuring fitness, cooperation becomes even more necessary than ever. It seems to be banal, trivial. You hesitate to say that collaboration is important because it's so obvious. But still, this gene of collaboration that we all have is not always translated into a protein. Still, collaboration is not done enough from my point of view, not even within EFSA. We are also a silo-ish organization. And we have to do management homework. Already many years ago, decades ago, the British cybernetics pioneer, Ross Ashby, formulated an interesting paradigm. He said in a system, variety is a measure for complexity. That makes sense, no? Variety is a measure for complexity. And he postulated a paradigm that only variety can absorb variety. Which means, if we want to control complex systems, we have to provide an amount of variety that can absorb the complexity of the system. For me, this is one of the most challenging management tasks, to generate in an organization enough what I would call fluid intelligence for addressing the future complexity challenge. Which also means there are no easy solutions for complex questions. We have to provide the variety. Obviously, this cannot be done in isolation. It's needed what I would call a three-step approach to connect, to collaborate, and to co-design. It implies to be connected through an exchange of ideas, experience, expertise, data, and methods. It means for me to be connected, to organize knowledge that we don't yet have. And that sounds a bit bizarre. How can you organize knowledge that you don't have? For me, metaphorically, it means we have to move in our traditional scientific domains to the borders of these domains, to the limits of our traditional scientific domains, and to sit there and listen to the signals in the Black Sea of serendipity. And then we should connect. Because we have to organize connections for the future when we will need this knowledge, which we don't have and we don't know that we will need it in 3 years. So to be connected can prepare us to organize knowledge for the future. And this is a kind of a, you could say also a peer-to-peer education system where sharing knowledge is no longer cheating, it's an investment. It's like an open source Wikipedia approach, and public institutions could work and act as facilitators for that. Cooperation obviously makes digestion of huge amounts of information easier. It's like having a multi-chambered stomach, or it's having different enzymes to break down different nutrients. And citizens can support this digestion process because we have now the digital technologies to participate, to let citizens participate in our work. The question is, will cooperation be enough to handle the challenges of the future? And I think we have to go a step further. If we think of the trias, connect, collaborate, co-design, it will also be about the co-design of the future. And this means mining text and data, using contextual information, creating new knowledge and maybe even wisdom. Yeah, here you see the difficulties of cooperation. that it's not that easy to move the elephant to the other side. And we know that cognitive computing, like we have seen IBM Watson or DeepMind of AlphaGo, Google, offer us huge opportunities. And we as EFSA, we try to apply this also when we do systematic literature review. Could we use computational computing to pre-digest literature so that the human brain only comes in the second step? It's not very new, but it's still a bit on the frontier, and we try to develop that. So, striving towards sustainable development goal, what can we do? Global changes and the data explosion challenge the way we are organized, and it challenges also the way we work in our fields. We need more holistic approaches, and we have to use this interconnectivity and cooperation of all actors involved with public health, animal, plant health, and environmental health. It really needs a One Health approach. It also needs a strengthened collaboration between risk assessors and risk managers, something for us to consider together with our colleagues in the European Commission. And these changes and technological developments set the scene in which we need to find our way towards sustainable development goals. Sustainability is the final goal. We are not passively subjected to these changes. We ride them, we try to steer them toward this achievement. We can and we should be driver for that ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no need to be pessimistic. Never before in the history of mankind have we had more opportunities to make this world a better place. Let me close with a word of a German writer of the 18th century, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who wrote, "Knowing is not enough, we have to apply. Willing is not enough, we have to do." So dear scientific colleagues, let's do this work together by connecting timely, by collaborating limitlessly, and by co-designing the future of this planet. Thank you very much.
It's working? Yes. So we have some time for questions. So you are welcome to put questions to Dr. Uhl. Okay, one there, please.
Peter Dum, thank you very much for this really brilliant and far-reaching talk. I liked it very much. There's just one point where I'm not sure whether this has been a success. And you mentioned in Europe we went further than, for example, in the US by separating risk management and risk assessment. And I'm not sure whether this is really a success in the end, because it makes risk communication much more difficult. It makes that's what we see in the end. Decisions are not taken anymore. It makes decision-making difficult. It leaves it to the politicians and not to the people with the knowledge, etc. And it also complicates a holistic approach. So, do you still see this is a big success to separate it so far, or?
Maybe it's like a Viennese coffee that we call a melange. It's both. I think you're completely right. The strict separation in Europe also has brought many problems or many challenges. We never say problems, no, we always say challenges, because we all went through the ISO 9000 quality school. So there's many challenges, yes. I'm not sure that what you refer to, the difficulties in decision making in Europe on contentious topics, is a consequence of the separation between risk assessment and risk management. It could be more a consequence of a meta-political landscape, the distribution of powers between national states and the European Union institutions, But yes, I agree with you, it also brings problems. And we have to find the right balance, that science can do its work without economic pressure, and that still this what I would call the staging phase, when the society stages a question that is then handed over to science, this is a crucial point, how this staging phase is organized. And there we are not yet where we should be in Europe. I agree with you.
Okay. One more question, please. Say your name and affiliation. Yes.
Joanna Katsiadakis, CFAS, United Kingdom. I really enjoyed your talk very much, but I want to ask you if you have a better idea on why the public expects scientists to be black or white, to give them only facts. Why they don't extend this expectation to risk, for example, that we are all different and the same thing might have a different effect on us. It's not a hazard characterization what we expect from science. We're talking about risk. And the risk is so different, and I don't understand why this is not more widely accepted in society, and if you have any ideas about how to improve this perception.
That's a difficult question. I see it more from a food safety perspective. We sometimes look with a bit jealousy to our colleagues in the European Medicines Agency in London, still in London, soon to be in Amsterdam. And we think, how can it be that EFSA is so much in the focus when we talk about glyphosate or GM, and the colleagues in EMA, they have a good life. I'm exaggerating a bit. But the difference is that with medicines, we accept genetically modified vaccines, we accept genetically modified insulin because we want to be healthy again. They are in the sickness business, so to speak, but with food, we are in the health business. And in food, we have done research on that in Austria. People really have a black or white approach. Either food is original, unprocessed, virgin, whatever, regional, healthy, wholesome, or it's a scandal. It's really a digital world with food, and there we are so sensitive with regards to food, so emotional, that the word risk with food per se, I think, is not accepted. Food should not be risky. Say, yeah, but that's stupid. Of course there's risk. There's always risk. You cross the street, there's risk. Yes, but not with food. And I cannot talk about cosmetics or chemicals in general, but with food really face the expectation of the society to be fully protected and to be even more protected. Don't use new technologies in Europe. Don't use a weed killer, for example, because we want clean food, we want to have unprocessed food. And there is, and I have to say from my point of view, it's now personal, not so much EFSA. Retail supermarket chains do everything to keep this picture of the romantic food production. And it's a plan to fail. It's producing the next scandal. Because obviously food is no longer produced as 200 years ago. Thanks God for that, no? Because it's much safer now. But with this romantic picture of food production, we also manufacture the disappointment of the people. Because if they see then a slaughterhouse, they go completely bananas, because they could never have expected that such a cruelty can happen to animals. So I think in communication with society, we still have to improve. But it's easily said.
Okay, thank you very much, really. And well, before we close this keynote, the SETAC organization has prepared a small token for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
So you remember this visit?
Thank you
today.
very much.
It has been a pleasure to have you here. Okay. We close.